Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to rewind the clock back to 1988. Sunny Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Picture this, beautiful beaches, palm trees, and then bam, right in the middle of it all, a murder mystery starts to unfold.
And you wouldn't believe how this case starts. I mean, it's almost too bizarre. We're talking about a worker finding a discarded handgun.
A handgun, just tossed out like it was nothing.
Right. Like it was an empty soda can or something. A .22 caliber, by the way. But it gets even weirder because along with the gun, there's this whole collection of other stuff. Bloody sheets, towels, a scrub brush, even an empty bottle of cleaning solution.
Sounds like someone was trying really hard to cover their tracks.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they were trying to erase every trace of what happened. And as if that wasn't enough, they even find a postcard from the Sandy Shoes Motel mixed in with all this.
So the police, I'm assuming they go straight to this motel.
You bet they do. They head over to the Sandy Shoes and zero in on room 708, and just like they suspected, they find even more blood there.
But no body.
No body. And that's what really throws a wrench into the whole investigation. They have what looks like a crime scene, but no victim. It's like a puzzle with a huge chunk missing.
I can only imagine how frustrating that must have been for the investigators.
Oh, for sure. It forced them to think outside the box and follow every lead, no matter how small it seemed.
So what other leads did they have at this point?
Well, they had some eyewitness accounts. There were these Canadian tourists staying at the motel who reported seeing, wait for it, a white Cadillac.
A white Cadillac?
Yep, speeding into the motel parking lot the night before all this went down. And here's the kicker. The people inside were described as pretty shady looking, covered in tattoos.
Tattoos, huh? Sounds like they're dealing with some interesting characters.
You said it. At this point, the investigators still have no idea who the victim might be or what their connection to the white Cadillac could be.
So how do they connect the dots? Where do they go from here?
Well, remember that discarded handgun? That turned out to be a pretty big clue. They were able to trace it back to a guy named George Kho.
George Kho.
And here's where it gets really interesting. George had been reported missing by his father, who, by the way, was a retired police lieutenant from New Jersey.
A retired police lieutenant. Now that's got to add some pressure to the investigation.
Oh, yeah. The stakes definitely get higher. Now they're not just dealing with a possible crime scene. They're dealing with a missing person who just happens to be the son of a former cop.
So did the investigation focus on George Kho's background then?
They looked into everything they could find about him, his past, who he knew, anything that could give them a lead. And they get a break when one of George's neighbors, a former FBI agent of all people, steps forward.
A former FBI agent. Talk about a helpful neighbor.
Right. This neighbor tells the police he last saw George with another neighbor, a guy named Dominic Chicali. And get this. They were driving, you guessed it, a white Cadillac.
Okay, so now the white Cadillac is popping up again.
Exactly. And suddenly the investigators have a possible suspect, Dominic Chicali, and a car that seems to be at the center of this whole mess. But they're still missing that one crucial piece of the puzzle, the body.
So they're following this trail of clues, hoping it'll lead them to George Kho.
That's right. And eventually their persistence pays off. A body is discovered in a creek down in Boca Raton, badly decomposed, but identifiable thanks to, of all things, his tattoos.
Tattoos, huh? Those seem to be playing a big role in this case.
They sure are. And sadly, the body is confirmed to be George Kho. Cause of death, 2 gunshot wounds to the back.
2 gunshot wounds to the back. That doesn't sound like an accident.
It certainly does not. It points to a deliberate, violent act. And with that discovery, what started as a missing persons case officially becomes a homicide investigation.
So they're looking for a killer now.
Yeah. And this is where Detective Phil Ammobile takes the lead. He decides to start by interviewing a guy named Michael Sniffen. You see, Sniffen was the one who'd signed for that motel room.
Room 708.
Yep, the same one. It seems like a smart move, focusing on someone who might more willing to talk, maybe crack under a little pressure.
So what happens when they bring Sniffen in?
Well, he ends up spilling the beans. He tells them he saw Chicali shoot Kho during an argument in that motel room. And not only that, he points the finger at another guy, Ernie Caruso, saying he helped Chicali clean up and get rid of the body.
So now they have an eyewitness account.
Right. Sniffen's confession directly links Chicali to the murder and even provides a possible motive.
An argument.
Yeah, but there's a twist. Sniffen initially claimed they were all in Florida to buy guns, but then he changes his story.
Changes his story. What does he say then?
He admits it was actually a drug deal gone wrong.
A drug deal. So there's more to this case than meets the eye.
Oh, there's definitely more layers to this story. And Sniffen's changing story raises all sorts of questions about how truthful he's being and what he's still trying to hide.
It sounds like this case is getting more and more complicated.
It definitely is. Then they catch up with Ernie Caruso, the guy Sniffen named as an accomplice.
And does Caruso deny everything?
Nope. He actually backs up a lot of Sniffen's story. He confirms the drug deal, the argument, everything. He even tries to paint Chicali as this hothead with a temper, implying the shooting was impulsive.
Trying to shift some of the blame, maybe?
That's a good possibility. So now they have two witnesses pointing the finger at Chicali. They have a motive, even if it's a bit murky, and they have evidence connecting them all to the crime scene.
It sounds like they're closing in on their suspect.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But there's still one big question. Where's Chicali in all of this? Is he on the run? Did he manage to disappear?
Well, it sounds like they had a pretty solid case against Chicali at this point. Did he just give up and confess?
Not quite. You see, Chicali, he gets arrested in New York, but not for the murder.
Wait, what? What is he arrested for?
A parking violation.
You can't be serious. A parking violation.
I know, right? It's almost unbelievable. But as luck would have it, the car he was driving. Yeah, you guessed it. It was that white Cadillac.
The same white Cadillac from the motel.
The one and only. So the investigators get a warrant, and they have the car examined by forensics experts. And guess what they find?
Traces of blood.
Bingo. Traces of blood in the trunk. And later, they confirm that it was George Kho's blood. So now, not only do they have the eyewitnesses and a motive, but they also have Chicali directly linked to the car that was likely used to transport the body.
So what does Chicali say when they confront him with all this evidence?
He sticks to his guns, claims he's innocent, denies everything, says he has no idea how that blood got in his trunk, tries to discredit the witnesses, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, talk about a bold strategy. Did the investigators believe him?
Detective Ammobile definitely wasn't buying it. He had built a strong case, and Chicali's denials weren't holding up under scrutiny.
So did this case go to trial?
You know, it's interesting because with all the evidence stacked against him, Chicali ended up taking a plea deal.
A plea deal. What was the deal?
He pleaded guilty to manslaughter. And the sentence, 7 years.
7 years. That doesn't seem like a lot for taking someone's life.
It does seem light, right. But here's the thing. Remember that drug charge I mentioned earlier? Well, that came back to bite Chicali.
So the drug charge added more time to his sentence.
Exactly. He got an additional 17 years for the drug offense. So all in all, he ended up with 24 years behind bars.
Okay, that makes more sense. So even though he tried to play the system with a plea deal, he still ended up serving serious time.
Exactly. And while it might not feel like true justice for taking a life, at least he was held accountable for his actions. And, throughout this deep dive, I keep coming back to George Kho. What kind of a guy was he? Why did he end up in Florida in the first place?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the details of the investigation, the forensics, and the legal battles. But we can't forget that at the center of it all is a real person who lost his life.
Absolutely. So the investigators, they dug a little deeper into George Kho's background. And it turns out he had moved to Florida from New Jersey, hoping for a fresh start. He was young, only 25. He'd had some trouble with the law in the past, but his family said he was trying to turn his life around.
So maybe he went to Florida to escape his old life.
That's a good possibility. His father, the retired police lieutenant, shared that George had struggled with addiction, but he was determined to get clean and make something of himself.
It's heartbreaking to think he was trying to rebuild his life, only to have it cut short like that.
It really is a tragic story. And it reminds us that everyone involved in this case, even the perpetrators, had their own complexities, their own struggles. It's easy to judge them based on their actions, but their lives were more than just this one crime.
This whole case has been like peeling back layers of an onion. Every twist and turn, every new piece of evidence revealed something darker, something more complicated.
It's a testament to how even in a place like Fort Lauderdale, a place known for its sunshine and beaches, there's this undercurrent of darkness, of secrets hidden just beneath the surface.
We've seen the brutality of the crime, the painstaking investigation, the legal maneuvering, and ultimately, the imperfect nature of justice. But what really struck me is how this case highlights the role of chance, of seemingly insignificant events that can have a profound impact on the course of justice.
You're absolutely right. If it wasn't for that random parking violation in New York, who knows what might have happened? Chicali might still be out there, and George Kho's murder might have remained unsolved.
It's a sobering reminder that sometimes justice hinges on the most unexpected turns of fate. What are some of the other key takeaways you think our listeners should consider?
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling how one seemingly small event can have such a huge impact on a whole case. What else did this case teach us?
Well, I think it also shows us just how messy justice can be. Chicali got 7 years for manslaughter, but, I mean, he took a life. Yeah, 7 years doesn't seem like much when you put it like that.
Right. And even though he ended up with a longer sentence because of that drug charge, it still raises these questions about how our legal system works, especially when you factor in plea deals and all that.
Makes you think.
And speaking of how things work out, this case really drives home the point that sometimes solving a case is about more than just good police work. Sometimes you need a little luck too.
Like finding that parking ticket.
Exactly. I mean, if Chicali hadn't been caught for that parking violation, who knows if they ever would found him or that car. The whole investigation might have just fizzled out.
It's pretty wild to think about. So, looking back at everything, what stands out to you as the most important thing that helped crack this case?
That's a good question. It's hard to pick just one thing, really. But I'd have to say, those witness testimonies from Sniffen and Carrizo, those were crucial. I mean, they gave the investigators this inside look at what went down that night, stuff that you just wouldn't get from physical evidence alone.
Yeah, those firsthand accounts really paint a vivid picture of what happened.
They do, and without them, who knows how this whole thing would have played out. Chicali might have gotten away with it, or at least gotten a much lighter sentence.
So, in a way, even though those guys were involved in the whole mess, their testimonies ended up playing a big part in getting justice for George Kho.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? But hey, that's how these things go sometimes. It's like a puzzle, and you need all the pieces, even the unexpected ones, to see the whole picture.
Well, this deep dive has definitely been a wild ride. We've gone from a discarded gun in a dumpster to a full-blown murder investigation. We've seen how forensic science can help piece together a story, and we've grappled with the complexities of the justice system.
It's been a journey, that's for sure. And I think it's important to remember, beyond the crime scene tape and the courtrooms, there are real people whose lives are forever changed by these events. George Kho, his family, everyone involved in this case, they all carry the weight of this tragedy.
It's a powerful reminder that even in a place like Fort Lauderdale, where the sun's always shining and the beaches are calling, darkness can still find its way in.
It can. And this case really challenges us to think about the fragility of life, how quickly things can change, how one bad decision can lead to devastating consequences.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. What if you were the detective on this case? What would you have found the most challenging? How would you have gone about finding the truth? Keep those questions in mind, folks, as you go about your day. And remember, even in the sunniest of places, there are always shadows lurking. Until next time, keep exploring those shadows, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.